My name is Erin Miller. I am one of the 3 librarians at the Western Quebec School Board, and I'm very happy to be here with you today as the convener of this session. I am joining today's symposium from my new home in Gatineau, which I have learned is part of the National Capital Region, which is made up of the city of Ottawa, Ontario, Gatineau, and then parts of the municipalities that surround those 2 cities. I also learned that this entire region is located within the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. The Algonquin are part of the cultural group known as the Anishinaabe. There's a lot more for me to learn about my new home, where I call home, and I hope that no matter where you are, that you are encouraged, feel empowered to research and learn about the land that you live on. You can find out more by starting your search at native-land.ca. And I would also like to take this opportunity to let you know about a course called Indigenous Canada, which is an open online course designed by the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta. It is a self-guided 12-week course, and it's entirely free. It's an introduction to the Indigenous people of this country. It's beautifully presented, widely and well-researched, and most importantly, it offers an Indigenous perspective on the events of the past as well as the present. So we're here together today to hear from Kennedy Rooke, who is the manager of Librairie and La Petite Drawn and Quarterly. They have been working in the Canadian book industry for more than 10 years. And they're passionate about children's literature, pop culture, and independent bookstores. Kennedy will take us through their prepared presentation, and we will open up the end of the time together for questions. So anytime you have a question, feel free to drop it into the question box, and I'll make sure that it gets through to Kennedy for that question period at the end. So with no further ado, Kennedy, over to you.
Thank you, Erin. Hi. Hello. Thank you so much, Erin, for that introduction, and to QSLiN for having me today. I am tuning in from Montreal, or Tiohtià:ke, which is the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. I think what Erin said is really important. It's important for us all to learn about the land that we live on. And I encourage you to find ways to resist colonialism however you can. So today I'm going to be talking about diversity in the comics industry. And I think that's another great way that we can learn and educate ourselves is by reading books, of course. And I'm going to talk about comics and graphic novels today. I'm going to talk about the publishing industry, about Drawn and Quarterly, and I'm going to show off a lot of the books that I have around me right now, a lot of my favorite comics. So let's get started. Here we go. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about Drawn and Quarterly. This is a nice little drawing of our store here in Montreal in the neighborhood of Mile End. This is our flagship location. We opened up this store on Bernard Street in 2007. The publisher, Drawn and Quarterly, was started in 1989. And here we go. This is another cute little drawing of the inside of our bookstore. It's a small space and we really pack it tight. There's a lot to see. And then we also have the children's bookstore, which was opened just over 3 years ago now. This store is just across the street from our main location. This is me. I think my eyes are closed in this photo, but me and some of my colleagues this summer showing off some of our Drawn and Quarterly titles in front of our store. And I've got in front of me here, Drawn and Quarterly 25 Years. This is a book that was released in 2015 celebrating 25 years of the Drawn and Quarterly publishing company. So to talk about the history of the company a little, it was started in 1989 by Chris Oliveros. It was founded as a quarterly comics magazine, publishing comics by Canadian artists. And actually the first artist ever signed to Toronto Quarterly was Julie Doucet, who is a comic artist from Quebec. She is a really important figure in the history of comics in Quebec and internationally. She was a real pioneer for women in comics. She really wrote honestly about her experience with sex, her experience in an industry that was really just starting out. She was one of the first artists to come from the comics industry, and it was a super male-dominated industry when she started. So from the beginning, Drawn and Quarterly has really been, I think, pushing the bounds of what publishing can be and what comics publishing can be. So the bookstores, again, opened up the first one in 2007. The owners of the publisher really felt a desire and a demand for English books in Montreal. And so the bookstores, of course, we carry and stock Drawn and Quarterly books, but we stock comics from all over the place. We stock prose and poetry, nonfiction, fiction as well. We sell pretty much everything. And we are bilingual stores. So the kids store is pretty much half and half English and French. The adult store started off as primarily Anglophone, but over the years has really grown to be more bilingual. And there's been a lot more demand for French books as well, comics and non-comics. So both stores are pretty bilingual. So that's a little background on Drawn and Quarterly. If you're not very familiar, I've been with Drawn and Quarterly for just over 3 years now. I started right before the kids store opened, and I've been working primarily at the children's store for most of my time. Like Erin said, I've been working for many years in the book industry. My mother owns a bookstore as well back in Sarnia, where I'm from. So I have grown up surrounded by books my whole life, which is extremely lucky. It's a real privilege. And so children's books especially are really important to me because it was such a big part of my life growing up. And so I feel really lucky to be able to work in the kids' store and to be able to pass on a love of reading to a new generation. And let's talk a little bit more about the publishing industry. So the graphic I have up here is some statistics. It was published last year by Lee and Low Books, which is American. So these stats are American, but I think they're still pretty applicable to our industry, our publishing book industry in Canada as well. So if you just have a quick look right away, you can see in the industry overall, the demographics are still very overwhelmingly white, cis, straight, able-bodied. If you look at the breakdown a little bit here, you can see that ultimately there's been a ton of progress, I think, made in the publishing industry, but we can see that there's still a long, long way to go. Over this past year, publishing, like many industries, has really gone through a reckoning in terms of demographics and the way that race presents itself in the industry. The next slide is of some stats from BookNet Canada. This one is talking about the return on investment of types of books from last year. So we can see that the demand for books by and about Black, Indigenous, and people of color is really high. Books by and about women and queer people. There's a really strong demand for these kinds of books, and there's a really positive feedback that comes from these books. people want to read these books, people want to see themselves represented in these books, and the books that are published and written by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, by queer people, by women, they're really good quality books. So I think the publishing industry still has a lot of catching up to do in terms of publishing these types of stories. This slide is just a little bit more, same from BookNet Canada. These are kind of the types of books that people are reading right now. Of course, everyone loves a book that's been made into a movie or TV show. Those are always very popular. I know that in Canada and in Quebec as well, there's a really, really strong support for Canadian books and Quebec books. I Read Canadian Day was just a couple of weeks ago. And so there's, in Canada and Quebec, definitely people really, really love to support local authors and publishers, love to see themselves represented in the books that they read as well. And I think when we talk about diversity in the publishing industry and diversity in general, it's really important that we are specific about what we mean. I think the word diversity is pretty big, pretty broad, and can often lose some meaning. So I think we need to think about how can we make that meaningful? How can we make it tangible? The way that I see that is that we have books that represent readers, that readers are able to see themselves reflected in the books they read, and also that we're publishing books that are written by racialized people, by queer people and women, by people who are neurodivergent and disabled, because part of, I think, what's tangible, how diversity should be tangible, is that people are being employed, people are getting jobs, and they're being paid fairly. And a lot of this has come to the forefront in the past year in the publishing industry. One of the things that came out of the protests this summer was a reckoning in the publishing industry about pay equality, about the lack of representation. Hashtag publishing paid me was something that was started on social media this summer, where authors of color were able to share really honestly what they were paid for their books. And it really highlighted a lack of fairness in pay in terms of publishing deals for authors of color versus white authors. And another thing that I want to highlight, which happened just a year ago now, last February, I think when we talk about diversity being meaningful, there's a lot of ways that it can go wrong. Last year, Barnes and Noble started to publish a new series called Diverse Editions, which was classic books like Frankenstein, Romeo and Juliet, Moby Dick, republished with brand new covers that featured characters who were racialized, characters of color, often like young people of color on the covers of their books. And this really backfired. A lot of people were really upset, and authors like Roxane Gay, authors like Angie Thomas, the author of The Hate You Give, really spoke out about this, because it wasn't what we were asking for when we were asking for more diversity in publishing. It was like a shortcut that wasn't really doing anything. It was also kind of dangerous in the idea that a child or a young person who may see something they recognize on the cover of this book, see themselves reflected in it, and then go to read the book and maybe would be presented with language and ideas that are very outdated and racist. So I think when you read these books, it's important to be critical readers. And so what came of of this initiative was really, it felt like a shortcut that wasn't really going to do anything, and it was quickly scrapped. So that's just an example I wanted to talk about, to talk about how you have to be specific and meaningful when you talk about diversity, because you can't just throw a new cover on a book and call it a day. And so when we talk about diversity in comics, I think it's really interesting because I think comics have a really interesting and specific way of allowing marginalized creators to get their foot in the door. Comics, a lot of comics come from zines, from self-published work, from small presses, from internet comics. And so all these ways, these channels kind of can lead to mainstream publishing, but they're ways that creators who are marginalized, who may often not have those opportunities, they can start it on their own. They can do it themselves, whether it's a web comic or a zine. Those offer ways into publishing. A platform like Instagram really lends itself to a visual medium. And so a lot of people have been able to find success through webcomics and through zines because they just were able to start it themselves. And so I think that's something really specific to comics. When we talk about diversity, there's a lot of opportunities in the comics industry. And especially now, it's obviously such a booming industry, especially for kids and teens. And so I think now more than ever, there's so many opportunities for artists of marginalized identities to find space in comics. And I think also we need to address the history of comics, which is often a racist history. There's often have been really racist caricatures found in comics and classic comics, like Tintin, for example, is one. But throughout the history of comics, it's been a problem, and even still today, there's comics being published that feature racialized caricatures that just shouldn't be there. Often now when these kinds of classic comics are republished, I think they're edited to remove these offensive images. And if not removed, then there's often editing that gives it context. Sometimes I think if these images are kept in for historical purposes or whatever it may be, it's important to contextualize it, especially if you're working with children. A kid can pick up a book and read it and absorb that information and just walk away. And so it's important to be really deliberate about what's in those books. You never know who's reading it and what they're going to take away from it. So if those images are included, it's important to contextualize that and to be able to have a conversation about it and to be critical of it and to introduce these concepts and use them to educate. So the comics industry right now is obviously super popular. Kids love to read comics. It's a huge industry. I think I kind of missed the comics boom a little bit. Raina Telgemeier started to publish her work just a little bit after I was around that age. So it wasn't until I was an older teen, that I started to read comics. And then, of course, especially when I moved to Montreal and when I started to work at Drawn and Quarterly, it totally opened my world to even more comics. So I would like to start by showing off some of the ones that I love. I'll show you again some images. The three that I have up here, Hot Comb, The League of Super Feminists, and Women World, these three are all published by Drawn and Quarterly, all published within the last few years. They're all good for teens. Drawn and Quarterly publishes comics for adults mostly. They do some for kids and some that are good for teens and adults. So here, these are a few that I would say are good for teens. those are your covers. And then I have also got my physical copies here. I'm surrounded by books right now. This one is Hot Comb. It's written by Ebony Flowers. She's a Black writer, and this book is short stories about Black women and girls and their hair. You can see, show you off a little bit. It's a great book for teens, probably age 13, 14 plus. We've done it for one of our teen book clubs, and it was really successful. And it's a really interesting book because she uses hair and the specificity of Black hair in order to talk about her experiences with racism and her experiences of coming of age as a Black woman more broadly. So it uses that kind of the hair as this entry point to talk about issues much larger. Whether it's like the first trip to the salon, or it's being like the only Black girl on her swimming team, or if it's being stared at on the subway and by strangers offering unsolicited advice, all these kinds of things like microaggressions and things that you experience kind of coming of age as a Black woman. That's all found in this book. It's a great book. I really love it. The next one I have is The League of Super Feminists by Myriam Mal, who is a French writer. She lives in Montreal now. And this one is great. It's written in color, nice, cute little comics like this. It's super educational. I'd say it's good for ages 10 and up. It was translated from the French, which is really cool. It addresses a lot of different issues of consent. It talks about beauty standards, talks about media representation of women. It talks about language. One of the interesting things is because it was translated from the French, the original French version really focuses on gendered language in terms of the grammar of French being a gendered language and how people have started to adapt to that. And so in the English version, of course, they kind of had to change that a little bit. It focuses less so on the grammar, but still on language and the kinds of words that we use, the kinds of words and phrases that come about and how that becomes gendered. This one is really great. It was published last year. And yeah, it's a really nice educational tool, I think, for girls and boys and everybody. Women World is one of my favorites. This is by Aminder Dalawal. This is a story good for teens as well, 14 and up. It's the story of a future world in which men have gone extinct. And it's hilarious. It's super funny. And you can see great little characters through it here. The author as well is an animator for Disney. And this comic book started as a web comic. She published it on Instagram, and then it was collected in this book. And it's really great. And one of the things I love about it as well is that trans women and non-binary people are a part of this world. So it's very inclusive. And I think it's interesting because it takes a concept that could fall into like a very binary trap of gender, but it doesn't. And it includes trans women and non-binary people, and they're just part of the world, and that's just the way it is. It's really lovely. It's very, very funny. And we've also done this for book clubs, and it's been very successful. Then I have more to show you. These three I have up here now are comics by Indigenous writers and creators. There's definitely been, I think in publishing in general in Canada, a lot more Indigenous writers getting given opportunities to write and publish their work, and that's definitely true of comics as well. One of the things I love about these examples is that I think comics is like a really, not a new medium, but a medium that's really thriving right now, is given opportunities to these kinds of creators. And what these books do are, I think, is really interesting because they're all really like retellings of history and reclaiming of history. So first off, the one I have is Surviving the City. The one I have in my hand is the second book in the series. There are two. And Surviving the City is really, really cool. It's about two young Indigenous teens who are navigating growing up in an urban landscape. One of the teens is coming to terms with her own two-spirit identity, which is really interesting. A lot of the ones I have here really focus on sexuality and gender because that's something I'm really interested in. And I think it's really important that we have stories that talk about the specificities of sexuality and gender. And so it's really cool that these books really get to show off a two-spirit identity, which is specific to Indigenous people. And so this one is beautiful. It's in color. One of the things I love about this book is, I don't know if you can see, a lot of times they have these kind of ghostly figures that follow them throughout the book. They have these kind of ghosts that follow them, and those represent their ancestors. And there's also these kind of shadow figures that follow them that represent colonizers. I think that's a really interesting thing they do, and is really specific to comics as a visual medium. You get this kind of motif that's runs throughout the books that's just in the background and isn't really necessarily addressed explicitly through the words or through the story, but it's always there. And so I think that's really cool, a really cool thing that the comics medium lends itself to, is this thing that you can follow it visually, and it's always something you have to kind of pay attention to and incorporate into your own reading of the story. And then I also have A Girl Called Echo. This is volume 1 of a 3-part series. The 4th one is actually coming out in a couple months, I believe. So this one is number 1, Pemmican Wars. It's a really interesting story as well of a young Indigenous teen who is kind of struggling with a lot of the same things that the characters in Surviving the City are. Family issues and school issues. And it's basically a story in which this young girl, you can see she's, taking the bus, she's on her phone, and then she is transported to a different time. In this case, in this book, it's to the Pemmican Wars. So it's really another a way of reclaiming history of taking this person, this young person who is trying to get by in high school, and showing her own history that she really hasn't had a chance or had any opportunities to learn about because of the way colonialism has impacted her life. And so it's a bit of a sci-fi kind of series in that she's traveling back in time to see these things for herself and meeting people who are showing her this colonial history in real time. And it's really great. There's also some space at the back where they give you a timeline of the Pemmican Wars. So there's resources, educational resources as well in this series. There's a little bit a recipe for pemmican here as well. So there's, this is a really great series, 4 books that all follow the same character going through a similar experience each time. And then this one I have, This Place, 150 Years Retold. This one I think is the best example of the way that artists and writers are reclaiming history. This is an anthology book, so it's all different writers and artists. I'll show up a few different pages because there's all sorts of different art styles that you can see in here, short stories. And again, it's a way of reclaiming history, of taking Canadian history kind of back and rewriting it in a way from an Indigenous perspective, kind of taking a history that was stolen from them and rewriting it for themselves. There's a foreword by Alicia Elliott, who is a wonderful Indigenous writer. And yeah, it's great again for teens, 14 and up. It's a beautiful book as well. And it's really, really lovely. And up next, I've got some more things to show off. These ones here are a few examples of some stories that talk really explicitly about gender and sexuality. So they're real educational tools. I think something that's great about comics as well is that they can take concepts that may seem boring and they can make them really fun. When you're trying to teach these concepts, it's really, I think, great to have these visual aids. And I have a few of them with me. My Dad Thinks I'm a Boy. This is by Sophie Ladbelle, who is an artist from Quebec as well. She is a trans woman and another person who started off on webcomics. She has a webcomic called Assigned Male that talks about her own experiences as a trans woman. This one, My Dad Thinks I'm a Boy, is good for ages 5 and up. It's a really short little comic about this young girl trying to navigate being trans as a young person and how she navigates that with her family and with the world around her. So this is something that really explicitly talks about gender and what it's like for young people, for a young kid. It's a really cute one. And then the other ones I have here are the Quick and Easy Guide series. This is published by Oni Press, and they're these really nice little pocket-sized books. The first one that was published was a quick and easy guide to they, them pronouns, which is a book that I love. I love this one because it's really lighthearted and fun. It's kind of framed as a conversation between one of the authors, Archie, who uses they, them pronouns, and another one of the authors, Tristan, who is their coworker and who's a cis male. And so it's just kind of framed as a conversation between the two of them, as these two people kind of figuring this out together, and one person educating the other. And especially the idea that they're coworkers is interesting because a lot of it talks about how to navigate pronouns in the workplace and in your world. So it's a really cute one. And then a quick and easy guide to queer and trans identities. This one I'll show off a little bit. As I said, it's really nice and cute and compact, really easy to gift to people. And this one is super cute, has these great colors. It's framed as these group of friends who are hanging out at a campfire, and they're all learning together about these different kinds of identities. There's all these little snails in the book that are kind of educating us all, which is pretty cute. And so this one as well, these are good for teens, 12, 13 and up. It's a really handy little guide, and it's super cute. There's a couple other books in this series. There's a guide to consent, which was published very recently, and a quick and easy guide to sex and disability, which is good, really good for older teens and adults as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting series. There's a lot of comics creators who are queer and trans. Like I said, they're people who have found success on platforms like Instagram and Tumblr on the internet that are able to kind of build their community and their brand on social media. And so a lot of these people are finding opportunities now in publishing works like this. And another one, which I have with me, is called Seeing Gender. This is one of my all-time favorites. It's by Iris Gottlieb. It's published by Chronicle Books. And you can see the cover features a whole bunch of different people of different genders, and there's like a kid here as well. I really love it because it covers a lot of different topics, and it shows us a lot of real life examples as well, like the people that are featured on the cover. But some of the great things about this is it talks about gender in a historical context. It talks about how colonialism has affected our perceptions of gender. It talks about science. It talks about media. It talks about feminism and consent. It spotlights different celebrities and how they have used gender in their work and their lives. And one of my favorite parts of the book is that it, in the end, it features real people. It features real people who are trans, and they get to talk about their pronouns, their identity, their presentation, what random object most represents their gender, which I think is really cool because it presents people with real life examples of trans people, and I think that's the most important thing, is seeing these people in real life and just getting more and more examples of them. I think one of the things when we talk about representation is that when there's so little of it, every time there's a representation that feels kind of clunky or maybe is a bit stereotypical, it feels like it's the end of the world because it's the only thing that's there. And so that's why it's important to just have more of it, because the more there is, the more we can cover, the more representation of all these different identities we can have. So I love this book a lot. And then what have I got next? These ones that are coming up. Princess Ever After is by Katie O'Neill, who's a New Zealand artist. It's a really short comic. It's super cute. It's good for young kids, like 7 and up. And it's like a prince and a princess tale with a bit of a twist. The prince is a princess, and it's really sweet. It's good for younger kids, and I think it's a really great book. The Prince and the Dressmaker is one that I have with me. This is one of my all-time favorites. It's the story of a prince who loves to dress up in fancy clothes, and he hires a dressmaker to help him make dresses. It's really great. The two of them become really good friends, and they develop this wonderful, glamorous alter ego for him. And he goes out and gets to show off these dresses. And again, it's a book that, like Princess Ever After, really gets to take a concept that we know really well, a kind of fairy tale story, a story that kind of forms the basis of storytelling for us. So many of these things, tales of princes and princesses, are the stories that kind of form the base of what we know to be as storytelling. They're the first things that we hear when we're young. So it takes these concepts and puts queer people into them, which is really great. I love it because it allows queer people to see themselves represented in these stories that really are so kind of traditional and rigid, but it takes it and makes it new, and it makes it really fun. It's important, I think, that we get to see ourselves represented in these kinds of stories in a way that's just really fun and light. And I think it's important to have these stories that are really celebratory. They have happy endings. They're not tragic. And so The Prince and the Dressmaker, one of my all-time favorites. It's written by Jen Wang, who has also written Stargazing, which I love. Stargazing is about two friends who are very different. One is very organized and loves to follow rules. The other is a real kind of dreamer. It's a really sweet story about two friends kind of coming together. It's good for young kids as well, like 7 to 10 or so. So Jen Wang is one of my favorite authors. I think she, a little bit like Raina Telgemeier, really understands kids and is able to create stories that are really sweet and really get to their anxieties and also just like their lives. Stargazing is a really, really great one as well. The other ones I have next are Dead India by Hamish Steele. This is another great one. It's about a group of kids who work at a haunted amusement park, and the main character, Barney, is a trans guy. And I love Dead India because it's super goofy. Their pet pug becomes possessed by the devil. They get into all these like random hijinks at this amusement park. But it also talks about gender. It talks about the character's experience being misgendered in school as he started to transition. And there's 2 books in this series. In the second book, it talks about, or it shows Barney getting top surgery and how that changes his life. It shows him falling in love a little bit in a queer relationship. It's really sweet, and I love this because it's not about Barney's gender, but also his gender is also a big part of it, and that's really great. The next one I have is Skip by Molly Mendoza. This one I definitely want to show off some interiors. It's really cool. It's about a couple of characters who are skipping through different worlds. So it's a kind of bit of a fantasy series. One of their friends goes missing and they go searching for them. So throughout the book, it's constantly changing art styles, which is really, really interesting. As you can see, there's so many different colors and styles we see throughout this book. It's pretty amazing that it. This one is great for 12 and up. And what I love about this one is that none of the characters in this story are gendered. Everyone is referred to with they, them pronouns. And some of the characters are human and some of them are not. But I think it's really cool that these like they them pronouns are just part of the world, that these characters who are not gendered, it's just part of the world. It's never addressed. I think that's a really interesting thing. And so I love Skip. It's really, really great. And next, I've got a few more to show off. Spinning and On a Sunbeam are 2 books by Tilly Walden. She's a fantastic comic artist. She's super young and she's published 3 books now with First Second. She's really talented. She has these great kind of sprawling landscapes that she often does in her work. And she is queer, and her stories always center on queer women and non-binary people. Spinning is an autobiographical coming-of-age tale of her early life as a competitive figure skater and how she ends up leaving that world and at the same time starts to come to terms with her queer identity. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's great for ages 12 and up. And then On a Sunbeam is really cool as well. It's a cool sci-fi story about a group of girls and non-binary people who are fixing different space stations. It's really cool. And again, like there are only women and non-binary people in this book, which I think is a really interesting thing to do. So I think something that I love about Tilly Walden is she always really unapologetically centers women, queer women, and non-binary people in her work. And it's never a question. It's just what she does. So these are just 2 of them, but they're both really great. And a few more I want to feature before I go to questions. You may know The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag. This is a wonderful series. There's 3 books in this series, great for ages 8 to 12 or so. The kids at the bookstore really love this one. and it's about a young boy. It's a fantasy book, so in his family, all of the women grow up to be witches, and all of the boys grow up to be shapeshifters, but he really loves magic and he wants to learn magic. So it's about his struggle trying to push back against the traditions of his family, to be who he really is and to pursue what he really wants to. It's a great little series. There's 3 books, and it's really lovely. And then the last ones I have in front of me are some books by Gillian Tamaki and Mariko Tamaki, who are some of my real favorites. Super Mutant Magic Academy is one of my all-time favorites. It's one of the first comic books I ever read and really introduced me to the world of comics. It's great. It's about a group of kids who go to this, they have superpowers and they go to this super school, but they're also just like regular kids and they're coming of age and they're graduating school and they're having crushes. It's really funny. It's really smart. And it's one of the books that I love the most. This one's published by Drawn and Quarterly. And then this one, Summer, really blew me away when I read it for the first time. It's by Mariko and Gillian, who are cousins. And they wrote it together. It's got this beautiful, beautiful artwork in it, in this nice like purple color. And it's about these 2 young girls who are about 12 or so. And it's about, they meet every year at a cottage together in the summer. It's done so well. You can really feel that it's kind of written from the perspective of these young people who are experiencing these things for the first time. You really feel like you're seeing these things through the eyes of the kids who are learning about things by watching the teenagers who are in the town or by watching their parents. And you're just kind of getting these like little snippets of these conversations. Like, it's like you're eavesdropping almost, but you really feel like you're also like a young kid who is starting to like learn about these weird, big concepts for the first time. And then Laura Dean keeps breaking up with me. This one is written by Mariko Tamaki and it's illustrated by Rosemary Valero O'Connell. It's great for teens. It's got this really nice pink and black color to it. Great art. And it's about a group of kids, young queer teens, in high school, and it centers on this main couple, Freddie and Laura Dean, who have not a super healthy relationship. Laura Dean keeps breaking up with Freddie, which is not very cool. And so it's really cool because it talks about boundaries. It talks about unhealthy relationships for queer people and for young queer people. And it's super sweet as well. There's lots of concepts kind of introduced to it into the book, like unplanned pregnancies and unhealthy relationships between partners and between friends. So it's a beautiful book as well, and it's a really great one that I love. So those are all the books that I wanted to feature today. I think we're just about ready for some questions. Like I said, I think comics, I love comics, and I think the work that's happening in the comics industry right now is really, really cool, and especially for young people and for kids. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll pass it over to Erin, I think, for some of them.
Thank you, Kennedy. That was what I was, I may have been ordering while you were talking. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through. There's been a number of comments anyway. The first one being fantastic books. Someone wanted to point out that there is also a teacher's guide available for this place, 150 years retold, which is good for all of us to know, being school librarians and library staff. A little further up, another comment. We've come a long way from Free to Be You and Me by Marlo Thomas and the Friends and Friends in the 1970s. I think that's true. We can keep going. Um, let's see, what else do we have here? Sorry, I am seeing questions and comments for all four of the current. Again, yeah, great books. All right, so to pick your brain a little bit, Kennedy, our theme for the symposium is nurturing thinking readers. And I just wonder, how do you think graphic storytelling can help with that goal or that mission?
Yeah, thank you. I think graphic storytelling is really offers us a great opportunity to nurture thinking readers, and that reading comics, reading graphic work, illustrated work, I think is a totally different skill set than reading prose. And I think often people might think it's easy and it's quick and it's just you're looking at pictures, but I think it's really true that it's a totally different skill set. I think you need a lot of creativity to read comics well. A lot of it is filling in the blanks, is creating your own stories and learning how to read text and images together. Even just like on a technical level, learning to read comics based on where the text boxes are placed is a skill in itself. So I think comics give us a great opportunity to nurture thinking readers in that it's a new medium that people aren't necessarily as used to, and it offers us a new way to read. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. A logistics question for you, if I could. So as I'm sure you know, school libraries in Quebec are mandated to purchase books from accredited bookstores. I just wonder, can you tell us a little bit about your own store in terms of accreditation?
Yes, yeah, we are accredited, so you can order books from us for kids and adults. We're accredited for comics and graphic novels, which is great. It's our specialty. And I am usually the one in charge of doing all the orders for schools and libraries, which is one of my favorite jobs. I really love it. I love to recommend books to teachers and librarians, which is kind of what I did today. If we were in person, this is kind of what I would do in the store, show you around. So you can definitely order from us. Our staff is so knowledgeable about comics and books and kids' books. We have a really great team, and they're always super eager to talk about books. It's always our favorite thing to do. And yeah, I mean, you can also order books for yourselves. Since COVID started, we've really moved most of our business online. You can order on our web store. You can order via Les Librairie, which is a great website that collects Quebec bookstores in one place. And we are shipping everywhere throughout Canada. And you can buy in the store as well right now. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work. There's a lot of opportunities to get books now, wherever you may be.
Wonderful. All right, we have had another question come through. Some people may think a book with too many pictures could negatively impact the student's progression in reading. And Melanie wondered if you could comment on that.
Sure. Yeah, it's something I hear a lot. I often hear people or parents in the store asking or wondering how they can get their kids to read real books. But I think, like what I said before, is that comics are really unique in that they offer a new way of reading. I don't think it hinders development. I think the fact that comics are so popular for kids right now is really exciting. I think they offer a great way for kids who may be more reluctant readers to get into reading. And I think ultimately we should just encourage kids to read no matter what they're reading, if they're reading, you know, a cereal box. I think that's great. You know, I think we just want people to be reading what they like. And I think if someone really is drawn to comics and really finds that they love that, I think that's a really wonderful thing, and we should encourage that as much as possible. I think if kids are encouraged and supported in something that they love, ultimately they'll be successful. And you know, I think maybe their love of comics will develop into their own you know, comics making ability. Like I think a lot of kids too, if they're supported in a thing that they really enjoy, they can feel supported to even create their own thing, which I think is really cool.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I also just got another comment from Melanie, and she agrees with you 100%. But you're right, and I think it is an important thing to have brought up in this context, because we might hear that from parents of our students, right, or from teachers, and thinking about that is an important thing, because I think you are absolutely right. Putting a book a child is interested in reading in front of them, I think that's going to just help leaps and bounds with their, you know, because you will have created a positive experience around a book. So thank you for that. I am going to refresh this one more time, so we have about 3 minutes left if there are any other questions. I might throw one of mine out there for you in the meantime. Kennedy, is there anything upcoming that you know of that you're particularly excited about in terms of comics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Like I said, the new A Girl Called Echo book, that's the 4th book in the series. I believe that's coming out this April. I'm really excited for that one. There's a new book by Molly Knox Ostertag, the author of The Witch Boy, that is coming out. I'm not sure when it's coming out. I just got an advanced copy, and that one seems really cool. I think it's going to be kind of similar in that it's a bit of a fantasy story that centers queer characters and maybe a little queer love story. There's another series called Heartbreaker by Alice Oseman. This one is super cute. It's published by Scholastic as well, and it's another really just cute queer romance, teen romance, kind of rom-com. And there's 2 in the series. The 3rd one is coming out really soon. And they're also, I just learned, turning it into a TV show, which I think will be really, really exciting. Actually, The Witch Boy as well, I just learned, is being made into an animated film. So I think that's going to be really cool. Yeah, those are some of the ones that I'm really looking forward to. Drawn and Quarterly is also publishing a new book by Elise Gravel. They published a book called The Mushroom Fan Club a couple of years ago, which is great. And she has a new one coming out called The Bug Club. And I'm really excited for that one.
I love Elise Gravel. I just did a class visit with her book, The Wrench, which if anyone here hasn't read that one, it's a really fun book, sort of a comment about overconsumption and how we're sold things all the time that we don't possibly need, but really lighthearted and fun. Kennedy, thank you so much for being here with us today, and for all the time and energy that you've put into making today so successful. We very, very much appreciate your time and your presence here with us today. Thank you again to everyone who joined us for our discussion about diversity in comics. And Kennedy, again, thank you. All the best to you in Montreal.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.